and welcome to this week's edition of Organic Matters, the podcast brought to you by the Irish Organic Association. I am delighted to say that we're joined this week by Mary Lynch, who is a very well-known organic farm advisor, and she's going to give us some advice and tips on what we should be doing over now and as well, I guess, running up into the summer months as well. So, Mary, thank you very much for joining us. You're good. You're good to be here.
Thank you, Hannah. No problem at all. You're welcome.
I guess, well, first and foremost, we've been talking a lot about clover and reseeding given the time of the year. Now, on the day of recording, we are recording on the 18th of April, but this podcast will be out in the next couple of weeks. So clover does seem to be on people's minds. Obviously, it does a lot for organic farmers, considering that we can't use chemical fertilizer. So have you had those kind of requests in for information?
Yeah, I suppose it's a big topic, and I suppose even at the 25-hour courses that we're running for the new organic farmers, it's the thing they're really interested in is how to get clover into their swards, because obviously, when you're leaving artificial fertilizer behind, trying to maintain silage quality and silage yield is a big thing for a lot of farmers, and then just getting used to, I suppose, just the slightly different growth cycle with clover. And just getting used to that. So listen, today's a nice sunny day. Hopefully the soil temperature will be up to 8-10 degrees. Clover will be starting to grow. It'll be starting to fix nitrogen. So it should be all good from here on in. And hopefully conditions will be fairly good for, if people want to stitch in clover, if they have very bare paddocks, but the paddocks need to be very bare if they are going to attempt to stitch it in. Or they'll be thinking about which fields now they're going to be cutting for silage. So they should be, if that's what they're thinking of doing, stitching in their clover in after a cut of silage or hay, they should be thinking of purchasing their clover seed now so that they're actually ready to go once the fields have been cut. And the bales have been removed.
You don't want to be sowing it midsummer. You don't want to risk drought or anything like that.
I suppose, and especially after a year like last year. So clover, when you are over, especially white clover, when you are over sowing it, one of the most important things are it light down into the bottom of the sward. So that's why it always works best after a cut of silage or a very tight grazing. But the other thing, the seed you need is, because the seed is very small and doesn't have a lot of energy, to keep going over a long period of drought, you need rain forecast within the week of doing it. So I suppose after last summer, where we had long periods of very dry weather, it really means that now it looks like possibly, April, May, June are probably the window that we will have to stitch in clover. And after that, then if you do hit 3 or 4 weeks of dry weather, and if the seed had managed to germinate before that, you would just lose it. So no one wants to be in a situation where they're paying for the ground to be maybe given a harrow and spreading the seed and the cost of the seed. They don't want to be losing it. So conditions are perfect at the moment. There's a nice bit of moisture in the ground, and there is, the heat is getting up into the soil as well. So if you had fields, so usually what I say to farmers is, if they can, graze off your silage fields first. And if you were doing that, if you had some paddocks that were really well grazed out, you could think of stitching clover in now.
Yeah, so that's good advice. And would be similar advice then for multi-species swards?
Yeah, well, I suppose in reality, multi-species swards are a bit like the red clover swards as well. Like, they are best done as a complete reseed.
Okay.
That's when they work really well. So I suppose some people will decide, listen, they're going to take one cut of silage off the field maybe, and then they're going to look at, doing their reseeding then as well. Or some people I see good few fields around the place plowed at the moment for reseeds, and that can be an option then as well, So, but yeah, the main thing is to wait till the soil temperature is warm enough anyway.
Okay. And I guess we mentioned before coming on as well, there is the government scheme that's there. Has there been a lot of demand for organic farmers? And people are going to think we're obsessed with the clover because we've been talking about it an awful lot, and multi-species sorts. But the thing is, whether you're conventional or organic, if you're conventional, you're trying to lower your fertilizer bill and use nitrogen fixating clover. And if you're organic, well, you weren't allowed to use chemical fertilizer in the first place. So if you're trying to finish cattle or anything like that, or even milk cattle, then you want to get the best quality proteins and nitrogen fixation into your soil, or proteins into your cows.
Yeah, and we're after a winter now where organic ration was €1,000 a ton. So if you can try and replace a lot of that by making high quality silage that's got 14-15% protein, that's a full feed for the cattle over the winter, whether you're milking or you've got beef animals you're trying to finish. If we can replace some of that purchased feed with silage or fodders that are made on the farm, that's a win-win for everyone. It's a win for the farmer, but also globally it's a win because there's a lot of air miles and boat miles attached to a lot of that ration as well.
Well, so there is, and I remember we were in a meeting not so long ago with Red Mills, a group of organic farmers, and all of the organic feed they were selling was imported. Now you can get Irish grown organic feed, but it just goes to show, like you said, air miles are a thing that need to be considered, as well as the cost that you mentioned too had gone up to basically €1,000 a ton. So all of these factors need to be considered. A question, Mary, you touched upon silage, and there are so many do's and don'ts around making silage, and I know it's only April and people are thinking, Jeannie, it hasn't even got to be summer yet, but we are thinking about making silage. So look, we'll talk about red clover silage in a second, but if we just talk about normal grass silage, kind of what kind of height do you want to be looking at maybe before going in and cutting it? And then I guess a wilt as well, how long would you leave it? We do want to make really good quality silage.
Yeah, no, like really, I suppose this in relation to height, it really depends what you're making. You have to think about what animals are you making your silage for. So yeah, if you're making for young animals or for milking cows, then obviously, you want the grass to still be in a leafy stage, and you'll be cutting it a bit younger. But like if you're making silage for dry suckler cows over the winter months, you can let that go on a little bit. Now, you don't want to let it go on too much that it's smothering the clover. But you'll have to you can manipulate it a little bit like that, and actually leaving it grow on a little bit where it gets just maybe slightly stemmy. It means that generally the sward will be opened up more, and it'll be easier to stitch the clover into it afterwards. So, but the wilt is the most important thing. So if you're talking about the white clover, you're going to want at least probably a 24-hour wilt, depending on the weather conditions, obviously. And then if you're looking at your red clover silage, you'd be looking ideally if you can get a 48-hour wilt on it. That's really how you're going to bring down the moisture. You're going to get a better inside bale. You're going to make, heavier bales, and therefore, you're going to be paying, less for the bales as well.
And do you want to turn it, or do you want to do anything? I guess
yeah, in most cases we don't turn it. We just we throw it out in the swarts and we leave it, and then if they are usually the contractors now like to swart it up into one central swart, then just to make it easier for them. And even if they do that a few hours before they're going to bale it, if the weather conditions are good, you'll get another bit of wilt. You don't want to over wilt it, because some of the clover will shrivel up and be left behind in the field, and you want it into your bale because that's what's giving you your protein.
Yeah. I'm laughing to myself as well, because on my home farm here, I have pedigree suckler cows, but I've been so hard on myself to try and make good quality silage over the years. And you get your silage tested, and it's been right, 66% and 68%. And this year I managed to get it up to 71% DMD, which is a pretty high standard. Anything over 69.
And if you'd milking cows, but realistically,
this is the
dry
thing.
cows, you probably didn't need it.
Yeah, realistically, then I was bragging to a friend that I'd finally got up to 71%, and he just looked at me and he's like, Hannah, your cows are fat enough. They don't need good quality silage like that. So I suppose that is something for people to take into.
Yeah, and sometimes
account.
People get obsessed with DMD and it has to be 70%. But think of the animal you're going to be feeding it to as well.
Yeah.
Because you don't want a situation where your cows are too fat, maybe the calf is getting too heavy inside them, you have difficult calvings. Then if they're too fat, they're going to be more difficult to get back in calf as well, because they won't come cycling as well. So it really is that, and too many people don't think about what animal am I going to feed. So maybe on some farms you'd be making two completely different types of silage. Maintenance silage maybe for your dry cows, and making then a really high quality silage that you're feeding to your weanlings or feeding to your finishing stock that's going to put weight on them.
Yeah, and I find a trick as well. Sometimes I do, if I've got two different fields I'm cutting silage, is I use different color bale wrap, so that I know.
Bale wrap, a spot of paint on them, a different color. It doesn't take it once you can, or once you can identify them, that's all it takes.
Yeah.
But so they're the main things, and it's as simple as that. When I was in college 30 years ago, we spent hours learning about different silage additives, and now it really is about good practice, having the right makeup in your sward, and good practice then just in getting that wilt into it and getting it into the bales.
Yeah, that's exactly. I guess there are other things to be thinking about as well. And I was reading my Organic Matters book that came out recently, and you talk about grazing and rotations. And I guess everyone, well, not everyone, but people are thinking about moving on to their second rotation now in terms of grazing. But I guess, some people would have maybe not quite finished their first rotation and their covers might be getting heavier. I mean, what advice would you have for them? Should they just skip grazing and maybe put it
Yeah,
aside for silage, or what's the best thing to do?
yeah, take a cut of silage off it. If it's a field that needs to be like that, as said, if it's a paddock or a field that needs to be stitched with clover, now is a perfect time for doing it, or in the next 2 or 3 weeks is a perfect time for doing it. In general, that's, and again, it really does depend on the type of animal that you want to graze. So if you're dairy cows, your attitude towards it will be completely different to someone who's got suckler cows like like you have. Maybe they're a little bit fat, that can take a little bit of abuse, and it won't do them any harm to graze down maybe heavy covers if you're not ready. If your stocking rate doesn't justify making all this extra silage, because what we have to remember now is that silage is getting very expensive to make.
Yeah, yeah.
So, um, but so you have to think about that as well. But probably this time of the year, you should be trying to make as much, make, if paddocks got ahead of you, definitely take them out for silage, because clover at this stage of the year likes to light down into the bottom of the sward. So the best thing actually to do now would be to take take a cut of silage off it and open up the sward. And what clover there will thrive and will do better then,
Yeah.
rather than letting very heavy covers at this stage of the year.
I said earlier as well, it is the 18th of April today when we're recording. Hopefully, by the time this comes out, we'll have had some news, Mary, about the organic TAMS. So there's a 60% grant rate there for organic
Yeah.
farmers. Do we have any inkling yet? It's imminent.
Hopefully, well, we were told kind of 2 weeks ago, probably the next 3 weeks. So we're hoping the next week or so. What farmers have to remember, though, is the closing date for it is still going to be the middle of June. That the department won't look at any applications until after the closing date. Now, you do have the option if you want to risk it, and once your application goes in, you can buy mobile equipment like your topper, your mower, or your tie and harrow for stitching in. But you are risking that that you will be approved for the grant aid.
Yeah.
So that's a risk, you understand. But the earliest date you can put that you can buy it will be the date after your application has been submitted. So at the moment we're in limbo. We're waiting for the scheme to open. Hopefully, as I said, hopefully it'll be, by the time this goes out, it'll be open. It's 60% grant aid, so it's getting to the stage now where, for a lot of machines, why would you bother buying a second-hand one when you can buy pretty much a new one for the price of a second-hand one?
Oh, don't go! You're tempting. You're even tempting me, Mary. Stop now.
Yeah, I know. And the farmers at the 25-hour courses get very excited when they see this list of machines. But you still, like, what we're seeing already is that the reference cost isn't keeping up with the price of the machines in some cases. So in a lot of cases, it looks like a 60% grant on paper, but it might actually be only a 50% grant, depending on the reference cost versus the actual cost that you're going to pay for it. And you're still going to be paying pretty much, the VAT on it. You're not going to get the full VAT off. So, you still have to come up with that. So you shouldn't be buying machines unless you need it. But the things I would always say to farmers that you need is you need a good topper. It's our main way that we control weeds in grassland. And so you need a good topper, and it's important that you have a properly operating topper that's doing a nice clean cut. Especially, we were talking there about new reseeds. We would generally go into a new reseed maybe when it's 6-7 centimeters high, and if you're starting to get some of your annual weeds like your fat hen and your chickweed, that's a really good time just to cut those off and take the heads off them before they get a chance to seed. And you can only do that with a topper. It's more difficult to do it with a mower, which won't move up and down in height, in cutting height as easily as a good topper will. So that's one definitely I would say possibly, and if that most farmers will consider getting. if they haven't got it already. It was the most, I think it was the most popular machine that was purchased in the previous rounds of TAMS, for organic farmers. So from a management point of view, it's one that you definitely think about if you don't already have a good chopper.
Is there anything specific that's in the organic scheme that this time around that wasn't there before?
No, I think on the grassland side of it, it's pretty much the same. There isn't a whole lot different. So we're still looking at your toppers, mowers, tine harrows with seeders, front loaders. They're your straw choppers. They're still probably the most popular piece of machines that most people would be thinking of buying.
There was some concern. I remember being on a farm walk, and you were there as well, I think, and we were in Tipperary, and it was a tillage farm, and some of the tillage farmers were concerned that there was an item that hadn't been included that should have been included, and God love me, I cannot remember the name of it now.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was. We definitely we put in a very long wish list, but we didn't get a lot of them.
Okay.
I suppose the fact that we got 60% on what we got was pretty much was what we hoped we would get, and that definitely made a difference. Hopefully, that'll make a difference to people coming in, and definitely it does seem to have for the new farmers as well. It seems to be one of the incentives as well. I suppose the big worry in relation to the TAMS being late is that, and if there's going to be an oversubscription, is the newly converted farmers who are needing to get building done before next winter. I suppose they're the ones we're worried about. That they need to be inspected before they'll get approval, and they can't start until they have approval. So they're probably the group at the moment that we're worried most about in relation to TAMS.
Oh, they need an organic approval, do they, before they can?
They need just like everyone else, they need the AES section of the department to come out and inspect it before they get approval. So if there's a lot of building applications gone in from conventional farmers as well as organic farmers, that could delay that. So they're the group, I suppose. We're hoping that that they will be looked after as well. But it's busy time. Sorry.
Will they still get, but in comparison to conventional farmers, they'll get 60% grant on building work, but they get a 60% grant on dairy equipment as well?
Yes, yeah, no, it's the same. They get the same as every other as conventional farmers as well. So I suppose one of the things we're worried about again is like that, the advisors on the ground are busy. We've had, we've SCEP, we've the suckler beef welfare scheme, whatever you want, and now this week we had the multi-species red clover scheme announced. The advisors are busy doing this, so it's a lot of work. And I suppose in relation to the multi-species red clover one, people need to have decided which plots they're going to put into multi-species or red clover before they put in their BIS, because you must declare it in your BIS application.
Okay.
So farmers need to be thinking now, if they are going to reseed a field, what fields they want to put it on the multi-species or the red clover, because they're going to have to declare that when they're doing their BIS application. So it just takes a bit of planning.
Yeah.
The maximum is 20 hectares for that scheme, so I don't think we'll have many farmers doing more than that anyway.
Yeah.
But seed as well, like the seed is definitely more expensive this year. From what, like last year we were looking maybe at 11, 12 euros a kilo for red clover or for white clover, and I was looking today, and conventional is 14, and I think the organic is nearly 20 euros a kilo. So there is that has to be taken into account as well. But listen, the 300 euros a hectare is very welcome, because it means hopefully the scheme will pretty much pay for the cost of the seed.
Yeah, and if farmers are able to, organic farmers are able to get a derogation, as they can't get 100%.
Yeah, and I think there will be derogations will have to be given, because it looks like the terms and conditions of the scheme say you must use grass varieties off the Irish recommended list.
Yeah.
So some of the organic seed that would be available wouldn't be varieties on the Irish recommended list of grassland. So therefore they'll probably have to, like similar to last year, there'll have to be derogations given as well. So it looks like that. So that will just take another bit of time. But the main thing at the moment, and even when this goes out, would be for farmers to actually walk their fields and decide if they are going to reseed fields, or either with multi-species or red clover, to identify which fields they are now.
Yeah. And I guess just kind of on a final point, and you mentioned there's a lot of new entrants into organic farming, and you've been running courses as well, the 25-hour courses that have been happening. Are there any kind of overarching concerns or frequently asked questions that you could just address briefly, and for any kind of new entrants that might be listening?
I suppose the one most farmers are, the new farmers are worried about is the paperwork. Unfortunately, as farmers are always worried about the paperwork. So listen, I suppose hopefully when we do the 25, when they do their 25-hour course, we go through the paperwork that's required for different scenarios, and it's often the first question they ask when we go out on the farm visit is how are you finding the paperwork? So the most, I suppose, listen, the ones that, as inspectors that run into problems with is those not getting permission for non-organic seed before they sow it. So it's important that if you can source organic seed, that you put in your derogation form. You can scan and email it into the IOA office, and they'll have an answer back in general back to you within a day or two. So yeah. It's not like you're going to be left waiting for weeks to get an answer. The answer will come back from the office fairly quickly.
Yeah,
so it's important to
like and I have to say, like, the paperwork side of it, I mean, I had my IOA inspection earlier this year, and I got a notification from Board BIA to say that inspection is coming up as well. I mean, in a way, it's nice because I nearly have the paperwork done for Board BIA already. So you can look at it that way as well.
Yeah, and that's it. And what a lot of the, what the new entrants don't realise is that their organic record book is acceptable to Board BIA as the paperwork. So they don't have any extra paperwork to do for Board BIA. Once they have their organic record book filled in, that's acceptable to the Board BIA inspector as well. So, and especially now with the new SCEP scheme, where farmers will have to be in Board BIA to get it, which most of our circle guys selling weanlings or selling yearlings haven't bothered with Board BIA quality assurance up to this because they didn't really need it. But now if they're going to want to get into the beef welfare scheme, they're going to have that. So that, for a lot of the new farmers coming in, is great reassurance, because most farmers don't like paperwork, and we're all trying to, in our lives, trying to reduce paperwork as much as possible. So the fact that, as you said, you had your organic inspection, your organic record book is now up to date, and when the Board BIA inspector comes out, they'll be quite happy just to accept that as the paperwork for you.
Yeah. And Mary, you've been fantastic as always. Thank you very much indeed. So that was brilliant. As I'm sure everyone will realise when they're listening, patting ourselves on the back. But for anyone listening who wants to find out more about organic information, they can go to the Irish Organic Association website, and it's very straightforward. Their website is www.irishorganicassociation.ie. But from all of us here at Organic Matters, thank you very much for listening.